This is the Samsung Galaxy Note 7. At the time of its release, it was known as the greatest smartphone that had ever been made. Nowadays, it's known better as the greatest failure in all of smartphones. There's no other way to put this. It explodes. But what happened? How did a smartphone from a massive trusted brand go so wrong? It's a great story, but we have to start at the beginning. Strap in. Today we learn about Like all stories about the modern smartphone, this one starts in 2007. Apple releases the first mass-market touchscreen smartphone. It would be an understatement to say that they revolutionized the tech scene. And as I stated in my Windows Phone video, competition was rushing to catch up. Immediately, it became obvious that Apple's position was that they were making a premium product for a more premium price. In 2007, paying $500 for a phone was absurd. It opened the market for cheaper alternatives. So pretty soon, Samsung swooped in and made a cheaper phone. They used an open source software called Android and found ways to make similar phones, but with cheaper materials. Now there's nothing wrong with this. Cheap competition drives down the overall prices of the market and makes devices better. But it was hard for Samsung to create a successful billion-dollar business out of copying somebody else's successful device. Many people wanted Samsung to make a unique flagship phone for consumers. So they did. In 2011, they released the Galaxy Note 1, a premium model to go alongside their base S2 phone. It had a bigger screen and, most importantly, a stylus called the S Pen. It was a great innovation for the time. It had a lot of cool applications and it fit inside the phone. Alright, cool. They're making their own design language and kind of branching off from being known as the Apple copycats. And in 2014, they released the Galaxy Note Edge that came with a curved screen, something now common among Android phones. They were becoming unique and cool through their premium Note line, and it was showing. Every year, for a long time, the Note phone was the best phone on the market in terms of features. Samsung had finally made themselves a profitable and independent business. Around this time, the trend with phones were bigger screens, thinner phones. Companies were taking their tech, miniaturizing it, and trying to cram it into a really thin chassis, because that's what sold. The thinnest phone that Apple had ever made was the iPhone 6. Yeah, let that sink in. The thinnest iPhone was almost 10 years ago. Now, if you're alive at the time, you probably remember why they stopped making them this thin. They snapped in half in people's pockets. So Apple quits the thin phone market in 2014. Now it's time for Samsung to step in and offer their competitor. So here's their decision. In 2016, they're gonna make the best Note phone yet. Their greatest phone ever, leaps and bounds above the Note phone that came before it. They decided to skip the Note number 6 model to signify how big of a change it was. So it would be the Note 7, and now the S series and the Note series were on the same number. It was gonna be their biggest phone yet. Best display, the S Pen was gonna work underwater. They added USB-C, a charging port that was ahead of its time and several times faster than the old one. All of this, and it was gonna be their thinnest phone ever, and even more rigid than the iPhone 6. They really had a competitor here. The greatest phone to ever exist, full stop. And it released to worldwide acclaim. Reviewers called it just that, the greatest phone ever. Until they didn't. Now, if you remember Samsung from earlier in the video, you know they aren't typically as thorough as Apple when it comes to design. In order to have these absurd specs, they really crammed all of these components in there. Within their first couple of weeks, an abnormal amount of phone fires were being reported. Usually when a phone releases, there's like a couple of reports of phone fires, 1 or 2 at the max, and it's all user error. A battery is very flammable, but it's still safe. The electric parts in a battery are surrounded by a flammable fluid. So as long as the electric parts don't touch, and you don't puncture the battery, you're fine. Within the first month, 112 Note 7 fires had been reported. Some were way worse than that, full-on explosions with toxic fumes coming out of the phone, often in somebody's pocket or next to them while they were sleeping. Samsung makes a statement almost immediately. By September 2nd, Samsung recalls all of the American phones. They claim it's a manufacturing error, and only the American phones have this problem. They send everybody a new phone. This one is fixed, and they get a little green light on the top of the screen to signify it's one of the working ones. Great, everything is fixed. Until those ones start exploding too. Not to mention, some of the ones in China are going up in flames. Those are the ones that were supposed to be safe. Reviewers like Jerry Rig Everything take apart the new Note 7, and they can see the battery in the replacement was manufactured before the phone started exploding.
Samsung was using replacement batteries that were manufactured before they even announced the recall, which also means this battery was manufactured before Samsung even researched the problem.
The plot thickens, and then comes the real kicker. On October 8th, a phone goes off while in an airplane, and it's one of the replacement models. This isn't a phone anymore, it's a weapon. The Note 7 is banned on any American flight. Just 2 days later, Samsung halts production on the device, but they continue selling it for another day. So much has gone wrong in just a short amount of time. So let's stand back a second and figure out what happened. All right, so there's two reasons why the phone exploded. If you want a more technical breakdown of how the phone exploded, check out the video down below by Jerry Rig Everything. He takes it apart and explains it in detail. I'll just give you the gist. Samsung really had to pack things real tight in this phone to get everything to fit. One of the ways they conserved space is they made the edge of the battery kind of like rounded to like fit more stuff in that corner. So the inside of the battery looked like this, and as you know, that is not good. Those are the two parts that you do not want to touch. In simple terms, they make a spark and it ignites the battery. It's like having two wires plugged into your car battery, touching them together, except you're surrounded by toxic flammable liquid. Other sources say there was this spot on the phone that had like spikes coming out of it. Samsung called it a burr. Samsung batteries across all of their phones are known to expand, so when they expanded, the burrs kind of just punctured the battery. Once the battery started to expand, it just punctures itself. Boom. All right, enough green screen. Back to me. So Samsung told everybody they would get a full refund. Bring your phone back and we'll pay for it. Great. They had a bunch of these phones unsold just laying around in factories and from returns. So what do? They put a smaller battery in it, everything else is the same, sell it as the Samsung Note FE. Much smaller battery, no explosions. All good. Samsung as a brand hasn't fully recovered, especially the Note line. They made 4 more Note phones, discontinuing it in 2020. None of them exploded. But that's not really the point. We have to focus on how they conducted themselves while the phones were exploding. Like, why didn't they recall the phones faster? Why did they say the new phones wouldn't explode when they were manufactured before they even knew there was a problem? I mean, nobody died, don't get me wrong, but some people were seriously hurt. Imagine trying to catch a flight home and your seat explodes. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night not being able to breathe because there's lithium gas everywhere. I'm not trying to cancel Samsung or anything, but I'm just saying, 8 years ago, they conducted themselves poorly. Their phones are great now, and I'm sure they'd do much better if something like this happened again. This was the first and only time something like this has ever happened, and hopefully, it doesn't happen again. Thanks for watching. Party on, dudes.